Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to unpack the story of one of world history's absolute greatest intellectual explorers. His name was Xuanzang. He was a 7th century Chinese Buddhist monk, a philosopher, and a master translator, and his epic journey literally connected two of the greatest ancient civilizations, India and China. I am so excited to guide you through this, because honestly, it's a true story of sheer survival, brilliant scholarship, and just unwavering dedication.
So how exactly did one rogue traveler map an entire ancient civilization? I mean, it sounds like the plot of an adventure movie, right? But this is a thrilling historical investigation. We're going to look at how a single scholar, driven by this deep, burning desire for knowledge, went on an expedition that would ultimately preserve the history of an entire empire.
Part 1. The Quest for Truth. Okay, let's dive into this. Back in 7th century China, there was a massive intellectual crisis. Buddhist texts were contradictory, pieces were missing, and Xuanzang knew he just couldn't find the answers locally. He had to go directly to the source. And to get to that source, he didn't just hop on a plane. No, he traveled a staggering 25,000 kilometers. 25,000! And remember, this is the 7th century. He covered this immense distance on foot, on horseback, and by camel. It is absolutely one of the most remarkable intellectual expeditions ever undertaken in human history.
Part 2. A perilous secret journey. Now, here's where the stakes get incredibly high. In 629 CE, the Tsang government had strictly banned foreign travel. That meant Xuanzang had to sneak out of China in secret, risking absolute ruin. If he got caught, he faced severe punishment, arrest, or basically starvation. And the Central Asian route he took, it was a literal gauntlet of nightmares. He had to cross the unforgiving Gobi and Taklamakan deserts. He climbed right through the treacherous Pamir Mountains, battling freezing snowstorms in these high mountain passes. And on top of all that extreme weather, he's traveling through politically unstable regions, constantly dodging violent bandit attacks. Every single day was just a battle to stay alive.
When you look at his life's timeline, you really see the sheer dedication of this man. Born in 602 CE, his departure in 629 meant he was right in his prime when he threw his life into this perilous quest. And he didn't return until 645 CE. That means he spent over a decade and a half away from home, totally immersed in a foreign culture, before spending his final years translating everything he found until his death in 664.
Part 3. The Indian Odyssey. After surviving the elements, the narrative shifts around 630 CE. He had finally made it to the center of Buddhist learning, the birthplace of Gautama Buddha, and his desperate battle for survival suddenly turned into a state of absolute wonder. But Xuanzang was incredibly focused. He was on a 14-year mission in India, and we can really break it down into 5 clear steps. First up, study under the greatest living Indian masters. Second, physically collect the original Sanskrit manuscripts. Third, visit the sacred sites where the history actually happened. Fourth, engage in debates to finally resolve those doctrinal disputes back in China. And lastly, bring it all back to translate those authentic texts perfectly.
Now, the absolute pinnacle of his time in India was at a place called Nalanda Mahavihara. Think of Nalanda as the Ivy League university of the ancient world. It was a staggering academic hub. Xuanzang reported roughly 10,000 monks living and studying there, supported by these vast, towering libraries. It had a highly international student community and, believe it or not, incredibly rigorous entrance exams. While he was there, he studied everything from advanced Buddhist philosophy and Sanskrit grammar to logic and mathematics, all under a revered teacher named Shilabhadra. And this brilliantly illustrates how deeply Xuanzang integrated into Indian society. He actually caught the attention of Emperor Harsha. Now, Harsha was the dominant ruler of North India at the time, a hugely powerful figure who patronized Buddhism and the arts. Xuanzang didn't just casually meet him. He was genuinely honored by him. He attended these grand religious assemblies hosted by Harsha in cities like Kannauj, successfully navigating the absolute highest levels of ancient Indian politics. Pretty amazing, right?
Part 4. A triumphant return home. Eventually, his 14-year stay came to an end. In 645 CE, the fugitive who had snuck out in secret returned to Chang'an as a celebrated hero. He was welcomed with immense honor by the very Tang emperor whose laws he had broken in the first place. And he didn't come back empty-handed. He hauled a massive 657 original Sanskrit texts across the mountains and deserts. Once he was back in China, he established an enormous translation bureau, spending the rest of his life tirelessly translating these manuscripts into about 75 distinct works. He introduced highly advanced philosophy, including definitive translations of texts like the Heart Sutra, which fundamentally shaped East Asian Buddhism forever.
You know, what's really interesting here is his cultural legacy. On one hand, we have the real Xuanzang, a brilliant, disciplined scholar producing actual, heavy-duty historical translations. But on the other hand, his real-world heroics were so awe-inspiring that they eventually inspired the mythical Monkey King legend in the incredibly famous Chinese novel Journey to the West. It is fascinating how a real-life scholar transformed into East Asia's most famous literary legend, protected by Sun Wukong.
Part 5. A Priceless Historical Legacy.
Beyond the religious translations and those epic literary myths, let's look at Xuanzang through a slightly different lens, as an ancient investigative journalist whose notebook essentially unlocked a lost era. In his monumental book, Great Tang Records on the Western Regions, he detailed more than 100 kingdoms. And he didn't just write about religion, he documented everything. We're talking the orderly political administration under Emperor Harsha, the societal organization of Varna and Jati. He recorded the religious pluralism, noting exactly how Buddhism, Hindu traditions, and Jainism all coexisted. He even evaluated their justice systems, their fertile agriculture, and their bustling city markets. It was basically a comprehensive encyclopedia of 7th century India.
He also provided these deeply personal, first-hand observations of the people he actually lived among. In his writings, Xuanzang had immense praise for the Indian people, noting their, quote, intellectual ability, religious devotion, truthfulness, hospitality. He was really moved by their strong, charitable traditions and the profound reverence that the culture showed to scholars, to lively debate, and to moral norms.
So the crucial point here is how perfectly timed his journey was for our modern understanding of history. Compare him to other famous Chinese travelers. You've got Foxian, who gives us a window into 5th century Gupta India. Then Yi Jing, later in the 7th century, who focuses really heavily on monastic practices. Xuanzang sits perfectly right in the middle, filling a massive historical blind spot. He is our primary, totally indispensable eyewitness to Harsha's empire and the socio-political realities of early medieval India.
Let's do a quick relevance check. Why does all this specific geography matter to us today? Well, because his records were so incredibly precise regarding distances, directions, and the actual terrain, his notebook literally acted as a decoder ring for modern archaeologists. Using Xuanzang's specific writings, excavators were able to unearth legendary, lost sites. We're talking the ruins of Nalanda itself, Lumbini, the actual birthplace of the Buddha, Kushinagar, and Sarnath. He physically helped us put these ancient places back on the map.
Of course, as with any historical document, we do have to look at it objectively. Modern historians highly value his account, but they always weigh its strengths against its limitations. The strengths are undeniable for sure. This is precise, scholarly, eyewitness testimony drawn from extensive travel. However, the limitations are that he definitely wrote with a heavy Buddhist bias. He occasionally exaggerated figures and sometimes relied on hearsay for regions he didn't visit personally. Because of that, historians carefully cross-reference his writings with physical inscriptions and actual archaeological finds.
Xuanzang was quite literally a bridge between two massive civilizations, creating a 7th century time capsule that somehow survived the ravages of time. Which brings us to a final, profound thought I want to leave you with. If a single monk's detailed journal could preserve the realities of an entire ancient empire for us today, what modern records will preserve our history for the future? What are we leaving behind for the historians of 1,000 years from now? Thank you so much for joining me in this explainer. Keep questioning, keep exploring, and I'll see you next time.